we're going to get started. I want to welcome everybody to the second season of Horizon Room. This is exciting for me because the first season was not only a huge success and wildly popular from feedback that we got, but it was also an opportunity for learning. So we did a lot of learning, we got a lot of feedback, and so here we are at season two. Episode one is really something of a continuation. And we're continuing a conversation about coding. And we started this conversation in our live events as we were traveling the country in the spring. And we started a conversation about where does coding really live within the context of our K-12 system. And we're not even going to get started on secondary, but we are definitely going to jump in on coding as a core content area. And so with me today, I have some experts in the field, some practitioners, some folks who have experienced some steps and some development, and they've tried some things and they've figured some stuff out, and they're going to be able to share their learning and their knowledge and expertise. And the hope is today to, as usual, get you some solutions. And so if you're participating, this is going to be that time. So as we move into our content area here and what we're going to talk about, I want to just a quick reminder on what the Horizon Room is, right? This is a safe spot. This is a place where we do some truth telling and some real talk happens, and it's definitely live as I describe to people who haven't been here. You know, what gets said, and so that's fun all the time. It's fun, keeps things spicy for us. And so, any of you participants out there, we've got a great panel of experts, but anybody who's there listening, feel free to jump into the conversation. You can raise a hand. Love having participation from all sorts of folks. Also know that this is getting recorded. We do have a pretty significant following of folks that because schedules are schedules, they log in, they download the episode, and they participate in that way. And I actually get a lot of questions from those. So those of you who are listening in, fear not. You know where I am, and you know how to find me. So you can always ask questions. Always find the people who are here as panelists as well, because those are really great resources to have in your back pocket. So my name is Chris McMurray. If you haven't been here before, I am the Chief Academic Officer with the Learning Council. I was a principal, I was a teacher, I was an instructional coach, I was a super, I did teaching and learning and technology, and ran through the hallways of schools with my compatriot who was the CIO. And it was awesome. We had a lot of fun, a lot of great work. And now I have the luck and honor of working with educators across the country and worldwide, and doing the work that really needs to get done so that we can move our systems forward for the kids, because there's a lot of stuff that we got to figure out. We've got to figure some stuff out, and a lot of that stuff is very, very foundational and structural. And until we can actually stop admiring the problem and get to solutions, we're going to continue to have problems, and we see those things happening today. So I'm going to jump into some introductions. I have some folks with me today that I'm going to ask to introduce themselves. Ellen Palmer is here from Pomona USD. Dr. Olga Romero may be able to jump in. She's going to try to break free of her conflict, and if she can, that'll be awesome. She's with Dallas ISD. Tammy Schrader is in the state of Washington. She is at ESD 101. For those of you not familiar with what ESD stands for, it's kind of like a county office. We're also going to have Venkat Vrada, who is a coding expert. He's actually with the organization called Tinker. Tinker is actually sponsoring today's Horizon Room. And it isn't an accident that Tinker is here, because they have a fantastic resource. I asked Venkat to join us because he has a perspective that I think is important. I think it's important that we bring together the solution providers and the ones who are implementing solutions, because that's a relationship that needs to be strengthened. So Tammy, can I start with you? Just a quick intro, a little bit about yourself, what your connection is to the topic.
Yeah, I would love to. So Tammy Schrader, a little bit about myself is in my earlier life when I was young, not like I'm old now, but I actually worked for a NASA contractor working on things like the space shuttle and the Peacekeeper missile. And when I left that career to stay home and raise children, I started tutoring at the local high school. Loved it. In fact, I loved children way more than I liked working with adults. So I went back and got my education credentials, and then I went to work locally. I live in Cheney, Washington. I taught for 15 years, and while I taught, I implemented things like game-based learning and computer science, and I was hired to teach science. And then after 15 years, our local superintendent at the ESD contacted me and said, I'd like you to come to work. And I said to him, I really like children. And he said, well, I'm not asking you to come because you don't like children. So I told him he could have 1 year of my life, and I'm now in year 8. And what's exciting for me is that I get to do a lot of work around game-based education, which is my doctoral work. And I'm now being asked by our Washington State Senate to take esports and implement it statewide. So I do a lot of work with technology and a lot of work with innovative teaching, and that's what I'm doing here. Thanks, Chris.
Nice. Thanks for being here. That's it's fantastic that you worked at NASA. I think that's one of the coolest things that you can start a conversation and intro with. I mean, I wish that I had something cool like that. If I could just roll straight out with, I worked at NASA, that would be fantastic. I have nothing that exciting, nothing at all. Yeah. Ellen, what about you?
I'm Ellen Palmer. I'm the program administrator for educational technology in Pomona Unified School District. We are the district that sits the far east side of Los Angeles County. And I relate a lot to Tammy talking about the things that she's doing with innovation. I've been a part of our EdTech team here in Pomona for 16 years and had the opportunity to teach high school here in Pomona the school was 1-to-1, and this was back in 2003-4. So one of our first 1-to-1 schools, it was the old fatty MacBooks. So it's kind of nice to have such amazing technology in the hands of kids where they could be the creators, not just me with my single computer, which I started with. And I don't have anything as exciting. Actually, my first job in education, I ran from. I didn't start at NASA. I started in middle school, special ed. I thought that was where I wanted to be. And after 2 years, I left the country.
I think there may be some similarities though. Middle school, definitely a unique sort of a place to be. I was in elementary for a number of years, and then I moved through the secondary areas, and I think middle school might be my favorite. At first, there was a little fear for me, but those folks are really pretty cool. They're in their 3 most awkward years of life, I think, and that's fantastic to me. So I don't know if Venkat, are you on the line somewhere? I don't know that I can. Are you? Venkat, can you unmute and do a quick intro, a little bit about yourself?
Chris, I can't believe you don't see me.
Oh, hey, there you are. There you go. How are you, friend? Venkat, for those of you who don't know Venkat is a friend of mine and a respected colleague. And it's really actually very special that he's here with us today, because he has some insight that in the live events, he comes to several of those, but I think it's important that we connect those two things. So Venkat, a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about Tinker. I also have a slide from you, Venkat. I put it a little bit lower in our slide deck and part of the discussion, so we'll get to that as we dig in a little bit, but a quick intro and a couple of words about Tinker.
That's great. Venkat Varada, though it's misspelled, it sounds European. I actually kind of like that. I always felt that I had too many vowels, too many A's in my name. So I thought that was cool. I said to say that.
I'm just helping you out.
Hey, Ellen, good to see you again.
Nice to see you as well.
My California cohort, and I love it. But it's interesting because We started this company 12 years ago. The one thing is we looked at our own kids, and we saw that they're not being taught this stuff. We were computer science math geeks and businessmen, so we said we saw an opportunity, and then the altruism of education kicked in. So it all came together in that. But it's funny because 12 years ago when we started, when we went into districts and schools and wanted to talk about coding and computer science, we got literally kicked out in some of the district. I was like, what? About 3 years into it, we almost closed the company down because I was like, okay, what is this? We have to run a business at the end of the day. So, but the journey has been good. We've been one of the earliest companies. I can't say we invented the block coding, but we made block coding popular in K-12. So that's much I can tell you. So there's a lot long journey and the lessons we're learned. My biggest tagline for anybody I'm talking to, especially in the K-12 space, is if you don't have to reinvent the wheel in the coding, computer science, and STEM world, please don't. We've paid the price you can gain from our wisdom.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, that's kind of like working at NASA, I'd say. I mean, getting kicked out of school systems when you come in and talk about computer science is actually, that might be a badge of pride. I'm not sure.
Tammy, actually, you will love to know this. There are only two main company partnerships we actually design courses with, is NASA and Barbie. And our NASA partnership is one of the most amazing partnerships. We do every 6 months some competitions. We did about 6 months ago a mission patch competition where over 100,000 projects were submitted in a week. And one of the NASA astronauts actually called into a classroom to the winningest project. So it was just something for you to know.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Well, thank you for the intros, folks. Anybody listening in, if you're, again, I said this before at the top of the hour, if you're listening in and you have some thoughts and comments, things that you want to add to the discussion, definitely jump in because we want to hear from everybody who's participating. So I'm going to give us a little bit of context. And so in preparing for this particular topic and in a lot of the work that the Learning Council is doing across the country with educators and all of the conversations that we've been having, the workforce research really starts to bubble up, and it starts to tell a story, right? And so as I was preparing for today and giving some context, I thought about automation, right? And automation is one of those things that we talk about in the context of how it will change the jobs of the future and the relative near future, but maybe more importantly, how it has to change some of our mindset as educators and how we craft systems in order to prepare young people for success and thriving in that time that we can't even identify. And so these are just a few kind of highlights that I pulled out and thought that this was this creates kind of a baseline for us from which to speak and think. And so thinking about automation displacing 20 million manufacturing jobs by 2030, right? That might be a source of fear. Maybe it's not. It's just some facts. Automation has the potential to eliminate 73 million jobs in the US by 2030, and that's just a projection. 46% of the current jobs go away because of that or change, right? And that's significant. That's kind of a big deal, right? 3.5 million operating industrial robots as of 2021. What does that mean to people working? It means that stuff's going to change. You're going to have to adapt, right? Creativity, emotional intelligence, STEM proficiency, most important skills to have to avoid job automation. By job automation, that implies that your function as a human can now be replaced or significantly altered by the application of technology. The other two that I think are very important is that over 80% of the jobs in 2030 have not even been invented yet, and that automation is expected to actually create millions of new jobs. That's it. That's very interesting. That's a critical component of this, because if you add up, if you layer each one of those pieces on top of each other, and then you put down on top of that a kindergarten class and say, now what shall we do? Now what shall we do? Knowing those things, what shall we do and what do we have to focus on? There's some competencies, and these are things that we know, right? We may not know what the jobs look like. We may not know what the function of the machines is going to be. We may not know what role technology is going to play. However, we do know what the humans are going to have in order to be successful within that context, right? Things like cognitive flexibility. We can roll down this list of things: tech augmented working, emotional and social intelligence, digital literacy and computational thinking. That's really our topic, right? If that's not at the center of what we're talking about, then I don't think I know what is, because what we're talking about today is how do we get that type of thinking. And you three are way further down your knowledge path on this particular topic than I am. And I'm about to turn the conversation over to you. But as I look at that and I think of, what are the competencies that are built through coding? It's every one of those, right? It's every one of those. I've watched students showing evidence of every one of these competencies because of their connectivity with coding and the thinking process that goes along with that. So that's critical. Those are two sort of contextual pieces for us. And this is our challenge, right? This is our challenge. Computer science is limited in scope and has morphed. It's changed. It's not the same. It shouldn't show up on a pocket chart somewhere. It's not our DOS and C++. Coding isn't widely understood by educators and leaders, and in a lot of conversations, folks feel like it's extra. There are a good number of people out there in the world that feel like coding is extra. Another challenge: we need to embed coding as a core subject, and that's not a nice thing. It's an urgent thing, and it's something that we have to grapple with. And then finally, digital arts and sciences is currently relevant and inclusive of technology, but the key is, how do we get it to rise in priority? Because our systems are not yet recognizing that coding and that digital arts and sciences exists on a plane that is the same as math and language arts and science, right? It just is. So I'm going to stop there, because that's our challenge in our context. And our purpose today is to share experience. We want to give folks an idea of how do you get started down this path, because every one of you has worked within systems that began somewhere and you got to a point. The folks that are listening in today, some of them are already down the path like you are. Some of them are in step 0 and they're like, I get that. I want that, but I don't know where to begin. I have no idea how to start. I don't know how to help my system go. And then we want to end with some advice for educators. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to ask for some thinking around the context that we just laid out, and then your experience as it's relative to that. Tammy, you had your hand up. Can you go first for us?
Do you mind?
Go for it.
You guys, thanks for letting me just be like, are you serious? Right. And Ellen, I do want to tell you that at one point I was interviewed for an article, and they said to me, so you used to work with engineers at NASA and now you work with middle schoolers. That's kind of a really huge difference. And I said, actually, it's no difference at all. It was great training, because let me tell you what engineers at NASA and middle schoolers have in common. They all think they're the smartest one in the room. They are not afraid to tell you what they think directly, how they think. And they will smile and nod while someone else is talking, but in their minds they're going, no, my idea is the best, right? I mean, and I love them both in different ways, but I just want you to know it was perfect training to work with a bunch of middle schoolers, and I loved every minute. I want to tell you that Jacob I want to tell you a story about Jacob, which highlights this exact thing. So Jacob is in my class, little Jacob. He's 7th grade Q, so a thing on the planet. Love him, love him. And at one point I am teaching an elective. So you have to know, when I'm teaching an elective, the difference is, I don't have to worry about state standards. They just let me run amok. And what I'm teaching is an elective on how to program video games. Now I'm going to be honest with you. I consider myself a non-gamer, and please don't tell my friends that, because I do a lot of work around gaming and education, but I don't like video games. Are just like, ugly for me. But I don't get to pick what motivates students. So students, I'm telling you, we started this elective on how to program video games, and there's a standing room only wait list to get in the class, right? And my point is, little Jacob, he's in the class and he's got this thing going where he's developing this game, and he's hit a glitch. And he says to the class, and you can imagine, I'm just this old white woman who knows nothing about anything, especially tech. That's his vision of me. And he says, hey, he says to the classroom, hey, would somebody please help me? So first of all, let me just tell you something. When students get to choose what they do, they collaborate authentically, which is a huge 21st century skill, which every employer that I've ever talked to, because I work a lot with industry, tells you they need to be able to do. They need to be able to communicate, they need to be creative, and they need to be able to collaborate. Play nice in the sandbox, as it were. So anyway, little Jacob, I say, Jacob, I can help you. And he looks at me, and the look is, you can imagine a 7th grader looking at me like, lady, you're so sweet, like patting me on the head. And funny, and his friends, it's not that they don't want to help him, but they happen to all be in the middle of their stuff. And I said, Jacob, come on, let me try, please. And he said, okay, fine, Miss Schrader, go ahead. So I come over and I said, can you show me what you've done? He said, yeah, I've tried A, I've tried B, and I've tried C. And A, B, and C are the only things on the table. So I said, have we started with a combination of those things, just systematically? And he goes, no. I said, well, why don't we come up with a plan for that? So he talks me through, I'm going to try A, B first, then A, C, and then whatever. Doesn't matter. And I said, okay, well, let me know how that goes. So I turned to walk away, and whatever happened, it worked, because he looks at me and goes, oh. And for 5 seconds, you guys, I wish I'd had a video of his face, because I was the smartest person in the room. And I was so I was got to be intelligent to a 7th grader. And he said, Miss Schrader, how did you know? And I said, here's the thing, when you're problem solving, whether you're putting a shuttle in orbit or figuring out how to program a video game, problem solving is problem solving, right? It's just computational thinking and going down the list and doing the next thing, right? And keeping good records about what you've tried, so that when you don't have, then you don't have to try it again. So I just want to say that those are the experiences we need to offer to kids in our educational system. And I do want to say this terribly opinionated thing. Thanks for giving me a mic. Those jobs that are getting automated, do you want those jobs anyway? And I love it. If you've ever watched the movie Stand and Deliver, where he is talking to those calculus students and he says, do you want to fix the cars, or do you want to design them? Right? There's your options. And I think about a lot, and of course I'm a big Willy Wonka fan, but if you watch Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where the guy lost his job because he was doing something with the toothpaste, I don't even remember what he was doing, pumping it in, then he learned how to work with the automation that was now pumped, that took his job, right? So do we want kids to do automated work? And I'm not anti-automated work, I don't think it's bad, but I can tell you there is not a single job that anybody is gonna in the future, and I know the jobs aren't there yet, but there's not a single one that won't include computers, not one. Okay, thanks, Chris. Yep. I'm done.
No, thank you. That's awesome. And I do love the idea, and I'm glad that you articulated that. Do you want to fix the cars or design them? Because I think if Dr. Romero was here, she actually told a story about creating a school. And it was really a very clever marketing ploy and move. And the culture was built around, we're building CEOs, and we want them to have the skills and competencies that are going to make them successful in that role. And immediately the mindset shifts. And so I made a connection. I made a connection between those two things for me. So awesome. No, thank you. Ellen, what are your thoughts?
I wanted to jump in as Tammy was talking. One of the things that Tammy, you talked about, and it made me think about a keynote that Dr. Bill Daggett gave. I think that as educators, we have to pivot our vision. We have to be much more future focused. I remember in the keynote, he had us think about a kid and ultimately what we really want for that kid. And then he, jokingly says, for my own kids, all I really want is them to be independent as adults. And I think about that now for my kids. In order for them to be really independent as adults, they're going to need to go into a career that will afford them that independence. I live in Southern California. It is expensive to be independent adults. And I think that we really have to rethink the types of tasks that we're giving kids and help teachers redesign them. I've been talking to my colleagues the last few weeks, and I keep getting stuck on, we need to stop giving kids schoolwork. We need to give kids real world work. It doesn't matter what class it's in. It has to be real world, right? When am I ever in my lifetime going to be asked to create a trifold brochure on a white piece of paper using pencil and crayons? Never.
Never.
Right? When am I ever going to be asked to even write a 5-paragraph essay in real world work? And so I was talking to my colleague yesterday about this, and I was saying, couldn't we have language arts teachers, instead of having them focus on argumentative writing in paragraphs, couldn't they like turn it into like a an argumentative email? Right? And show the kids how to write email, because I know in my real world work I do a lot of emailing. And so that's one of the areas I think that's going to be a huge pivot. Most teachers, because we spend our lifetime in classrooms, we don't know oftentimes what real world work looks like. I know that we've been looking at a computer science platform to possibly bring in and test with our kids. And one of the things that why we're considering bringing them in is they actually have created partnerships. And so our kids would get, at the middle school level, the kids would get an opportunity to do apprenticeships, virtual apprenticeships. And then at the high school level, they actually have paid internships. And so I think that would be phenomenal, because kids would get that real world experience. And we talk about engaging kids. Kids want rigor. They want to solve problems that matter to them. Yep. And so that's one of the things, as you guys were talking, that really kind of stood out to me. And Tammy, I always tease in our system, ed tech's and everything. So yeah, when community and pupil resources is thinking about doing something, I always kind of push in and go, okay, ed tech needs to be here, because we need to see how we can integrate and support and elevate your work.
So I think that's what I find interesting as I listen. And Venkat, I'm gonna poke at you in just a moment. Our topic is actually coding as core, and we're dancing around the words of the topic, but I think we're getting closer to the intent of the topic, because the intent of the topic is application, right? And so that's fascinating to me. Venkat, what are your thoughts given the context and where we need to go? Because I know that you and I have talked about digital arts and sciences many times, and so where are you sitting in this conversation right now?
A lot of great thoughts. I'm curious as to who the vendor is now. Ellen, you brought it up. You knew I would put you on the spot.
So I didn't want to name drop vendors.
But I think one of the things that's happening here is just as a hit, and coming to the coding as a core. I will hopefully bring the point to that with this is, when I studied computer science, and I don't want to date myself, I was a math and computer science major, and computer science and coding were one. They were married, because coding had more applications, in coding were tied with in the computer science field, and then most of them were applications in the research field, not in the commercial field. In the application, that came in the late 90s, more and more as it came, or it's far few in between kind of a thing. But now, today, coding and computer science can stand alone on them. This is analogous to very thing Tammy said, would you like to fix the car or design the car? So honestly, coding has become a trade of the future, or trade of the now and the future. And a lot of the teachers, a lot of the K-12 need to start using that term. Is coding is the trade, is the brand new trade of the, and it pays like none of the other trades typically to pay. Maybe pays about the same or more, but the units at work are a lot more less stressful depending on the eyes you put into it, so to speak, and the trade. So the idea here is, how do you bring that? If that is the case, coding is the trade. I think you'll also take away the intimidation factor of all these cultural things that are built upon over a period of time, because coding and computer science is for those people. It doesn't matter how it came along, because I guarantee you today, I don't care if it's Pomona or any other district that I walk into today, you use the word computer science, 95% of the teachers will run away from it, and 90% of the teachers will run away from it. Why are we killing them with these words? The coding is about 50-50, you'll get to that, because the inherent value of problem solving, computational thinking, creative thinking skills, all of those we know are inherent of that. And it has the same, the right brain development that it needs without the complexity or arbitrary nature of math. In the logical thinking and all those kind of things. And the nice part about coding is you have to fail to succeed. I don't know of anybody who actually said, I got it the first right. I probably will slap them. I got the code first time right. I'm like, good luck with that one. So it is kind of an anti-education, the way whether it's I studied in India or here, it goes in its own opposite way. So when you think about coding as core, you're not thinking, again, the K-12 education thinkings, I need to bring coding into schools. That's, again, old school thought. The question is, how do I integrate coding into anything that I am doing? Is the thought, because it has to be that way. And the challenge with that is a lot of the K-12 institutions we walk into, when you use the word coding at code, you have to redefine it, what core means in that. Okay, and then takes. So when you are looking at a provider or a platform or a solution or things like that, you have to consider the breadth of applications that can provide. Because I really don't care if the student ever chooses a computer science path. But if they can go away with coding proficiency, you could be like my son, who is my third child, who is about to get into a PhD program in psychology. And God bless him, in the 5 years of bachelor's and master's, he never asked me for a penny, because he funded his schooling through his coding. He charges $50-60 an hour and does that projects and did it. And here's the best part about it is, he hates coding, but he loves the money.
He wants to be independent as an adult.
Exactly. So, when I talk to the district administrators and say, there are more kids like mine in your school than you think they're not. They might not be able to. How are you equipping them in there? I'll give you one more example and I'll close with that. I love to see fourth graders. I think a lot of people are doing middle and high school. I believe we have all that stuff in Tinker. That's not the point. But we started in elementary early on when we started the company, is because we realized if we don't get the interest going in that level, then it's too late for a lot of kids to even integrate that into their lives. So that's why elementary is a great spot to do all of that. But I'll give you an example. I sit down with fourth graders all the time. Whenever I walk into a district and I have a whole bunch of teachers on one side, students on the other side, and I ask them one question: what do you want to be when you grow up? You all know the answer. 9 out of 10 students tell me I want to be a YouTuber. Now, just like Ellen laughed, all the teachers laughed and smiled too. And that's okay. That is the reaction. But I stop and saying, we need to go deeper right here. Because it can't stop there. Because that's a cute thing. That's a new the question is going to be is, as an educator and as a provider, I want to ask, are we going to have them become consumers or makers.
Right, creators.
That makes the difference.
That's a great point. I want to, as I'm listening, one of the things that I want to get to, I know that Leilani has her hand up, and I'm going to get to you, Leilani. I want to move us into the idea of the misconception and how we get teachers and educators and leaders over that understanding hump so that they can actually begin to put that into their schema, because that's an area that a lot of our listeners today and a lot of the schools that we talk to really struggle with. So Lonnie, I'm going to jump over to you. I'm going to ask you to unmute and share your thinking before we jump into that next topic.
Okay, I can even share video at the same time. Woohoo!
Hey, there you go.
And take my hand down. So two things I wanted to mention just as the share experience point is that, you know, I wrote an article recently for Learning Council News that coding is core. And my viewpoint on the mandatoriness, made up a new word there, of making coding core is that it's globally competitive to do that. There's other countries that have made it core. And they're creating armies of people that can do a better job than us at the technology that mostly we invented here in America. So it's a little crazy to me that we're not making it core, because it's literally a globally competitive job. You can do it from home, like Venkat's son can do, right? So that was my major point, is that if I was a superintendent or a principal or running a school in any capacity right now, I would make it core. I would put it on the schedule and do it. Especially since there's software out there like Tinkers where you don't have to know coding yourself as a teacher, right? You can just use the stuff.
Yeah.
So the second point that I want to make is that, you know, Learning Council also is doing the hybrid logistics project. So we have coders, right? We have coders working in No Story. A couple of the coders that we've hired are in the United States, but it's really hard for me to hire coders in the United States because they're super expensive. So the rest of our coders are in the Ukraine. And that's been an interesting journey for me this past year or so. The thing that I want to say about it, though, is that I have been on innumerable product management meetings with the coders and watched them socially work out problems. So you often get this image of a coder as like a, you know, like a troll sitting in a dark room, you know, drinking Cokes and eating, you know, Twinkies all day and coding. That's not true. There is a huge amount of social interaction. There's also, like Venkat was saying, moments of extreme frustration. You can't make something work, you know, the post code or whatever, the API is not working for the front end guy to grab from the back end guy, and something's not translating. It's giving 404 errors, and they're all frustrated and mad at each other. And then somehow they miraculously work it out, right? And it really is a point of forcing themselves to communicate with precision and having to work out things and figure out and trace back what's happened. And if that isn't a skill we don't all need, I don't know what is, right? Because I don't see that in a lot of classrooms. And I love it. I love watching it happen. It's like fantastic. So that was my comment.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a great segue though, and it's definitely connected to what we're talking about, because you know, it's not thought of as a discrete thing. In any one of these examples that we're talking about, the skills are just the skills, and it's a way of being for the folks who are adept at those. So what I want to get to today, and at this point in our conversation, is where do we start? Because all of these things are great. All of these things are necessary. Yes, we do need to have administrators put that into the schedule. It does need to be integrated. It does need to be ubiquitous. It does need to be all the things that we just talked about. Where do you start? How do you start in a school system and get that ball rolling? And I think I'm gonna go to Tammy first. Tammy, what's your experience? How do you get this thing moving?
Well, so here's how it worked for me and how I started is I actually was sitting in a game-based company. I was asked to go be a consultant, a science consultant. They were building games for middle schoolers for science. And at one point, I'm trying to explain the Earth, Moon, and Sun system and why we have phases of the moon. And there was this fear. And by the way, everybody in there was in their early 20s, with the exception of me. Okay. But they were really gracious to the old person in the room, and they were really kind. I want you to also picture a room full of 60 to 70 introverts and me, right? And I tried really hard to tone down my personality, but at one point, I'm running around the room trying to explain this, and one of the kids says to me, Tammy, I don't think I understand what you're saying. Could you come over to the computer? I walked over to the computer, and he had programmed it. From the time it took me to walk across the room, he's programmed an Earth, Moon, and a Sun. And at that moment, I thought, that thing, how the light bulb goes off over your head. So what I went and I said to my programming friends, what's the best thing I can do for kids? And they said, well, this thing called Scratch has just been invented, right? Tinker wasn't quite there yet. I'm sorry, but we did end up getting to Tinker, which was amazing. Because again, I don't get to pick what motivates kids. And what I loved is I went back and I had an administration that was lovely. And I simply said, I'm going to start doing Scratch with kids. And they said, okay, they pretty much left me alone. And I gave 2 lessons, and those kids were off programming 180 lines at night. And my principal said to me, Tammy, you're a day ahead of these kids, right? And I said, no, I was 5 minutes ahead of them. And then they logged in. I don't need to be ahead of them. I don't have to go home. I don't have time, not to be rude, to go home and code 180 lines a night. I don't have time. I don't have the energy. I have other things I have to be doing as an adult, right? But I do know how to give kids instruction to give them experience so that they want to go do that, right? And my thought is this: you give them just this much and they're off and running. And by the way, when they were doing Scratch in my room, they never wanted, maybe the kids just didn't like me. They just didn't want to talk to me. They wanted to, and these are the things that I found, because I'll be honest, when I started, I thought, oh man, I do not want kids just zoned into a computer screen. That scares me. We've already got enough screen time going on. And they did the opposite. They were yelling across the room. They collaborated. They were moving through the room. They would carry their little computers everywhere. And I will have to say, one of the things that really helped out later, and I can't believe I'm saying this on a video, but was COVID. That when COVID hit, all of a sudden every district in my region went 1-to-1. And I couldn't have planned that if you'd have given me 3 years. And so this is what I do want to say. When COVID hit, teachers were contacting me. They're like, Tammy, we're afraid kids are going to cheat. And I said, first of all, if you're asking questions that kids can cheat on, you're not asking the right question. And secondly, when I went to work for NASA, there were no answers in the back of the book. That needs to go there, and you need to figure out how to get it there, right? And so I used to say to kids all the time, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough, right? Because the answer is not somewhere inside a box or at the end of the book. The answer is going to come out of your head, and you need to figure out where it is and find it and invent it, right? So that's how I started. I started simple, and I'm going to tell you, I did spend the summer trying to learn Scratch. I can tell you that once kids logged on, they were way ahead of me. Like they were doing crazy stuff, and I'm like, I don't know how they did, but I learned that I didn't have to know all the little ins and outs. I had to know enough to start them. Same with Tinker, right? I just need to know enough to start them, and then they find all these tricks and tips that are amazing.
Yeah.
So and yeah. And I do want to say this, Chris, thanks for letting me say one last thing.
No, go for it.
There's not a single thing. And when I teach adults now as well, if you look around you right now, wherever you are, I don't care where you are, there is not a single thing in your space that a computer hasn't touched. Not your chair, not desk, because unless somebody handcrafted it, it touched a machine somewhere and somebody programmed it. And that's true for everything in your space. Okay, thanks, Chris.
No, that's great. And I think starting small, choosing one thing, I think that's one of those advice pieces for folks as we begin to wrap up a little bit later. I think that's one of those advices. Ellen, where do you start? How do you begin in a system to get those folks moving?
So in Pomona, we like to go a little bit bigger. So when the California computer science standards came out, our previous director of EdTech decided that we needed to establish a program, and we called it Computer Science and Robotics for All. And so it's been our goal. The pandemic has put a little wrench in our little blip in our plan, but what we've been doing is working to get the resources in place for all of our elementary schools. We do a 3-to-1 kit model with Lego robotics. And we're in our final phase next year. So all of our teachers will have Lego robotics kits that they can readily use. The first year out the gate, when we rolled out our one-to-one initiative, we actually had assessed readiness. So we decided that for computer science, we would do the same thing. Those that were more ready to hit the ground running with one-to-one Chromebooks, we would roll out in phases our computer science and robotics program. We were able that first year, we did a week-long summer conference for our key teacher leaders that we identified and wanted to create like a trainer of trainers within our district. And so we had 25 teachers and administrators come to that week-long training with Lego. And we got to go through all of the lessons that they had for at the time they had 3 robots, 2 of which have sunsetted, and now we're on to 2 new robots. But so we started there, and obviously with phase 1, these were our early adopters of technology, and so it was a little bit easier. And the other thing that made it easier is we were able to do pull-out days. So we were actually able to get a sub for all of the kindergarten teachers in our district for phase 1, and they all came to training on the same day, and they got to play and learn how to do, pair programming and learn how to do all of the lessons that we had. And we got an opportunity to leverage San Francisco State's computer science lessons that they designed years ago, and we're still leveraging those. And so we were able to give them the Lego experience as well as the computer science, and we kind of set expectations that we wanted to see them do a minimum number of hours of computer science and robotics with the kids. And so phase 1, is easily to kind of implement, and you're working with your early adopters. And then phase 2 came along, and we got to do the same model. But when the pandemic hit, we were we're trying to figure out now, because we don't have the subs that we used to have, so we can't do the pullouts. So we've had to pivot, and our teacher specialists in EdTech now are doing an embedded training model where they actually go and they're doing the training with the teachers, but in the class with the kids. And so they're going in and modeling for the teacher, and then they're co-planning, and the teacher then kind of takes over a little bit, and eventually getting to the point where the teacher says, okay, I feel like I could integrate this into my teaching and learning. That was the elementary. We thought we were going to work our way backwards and kind of figure out middle school at the end. So we started out also for high schools. We started out by pulling in our most techie teachers at the high school level, and those that were wanting to get the computer science supplemental credential that came about in California. And so we pulled them in, and we wrote courses aligned to AP courses. So we were kind of doing the advanced and the elementary. But we're still at a point where we're kind of struggling to figure out, what do we do for our secondary? In our mind, we think the best next step for us would be we have a basic tech class that all freshmen have to take at the high school level for credit. And so we've started talking to our secondary director as well as some of the principals to say, hey, when your business teacher retires, because many of them are reaching that age, let's work with you to hire a computer science teacher, because all of those courses that we actually wrote many of them. The student can take the course for computer science credit for electives, or they can actually take it for math credit. So like they could do math 1, math 2, and then take computer science and get their third course of math fulfilled for graduation. But we also want to kind of like commandeer that basic tech class, because the basic tech skills are now being taught in core content areas, right? Our history teachers and our ELA teachers, they're teaching kids how to format essays and do bibliographies and that kind of stuff. And so we'd love for that basic tech class to kind of, transition into all high school students freshman year have to take a computer science class. So, but we're still stuck with the middle school, because at the middle school, in order to be competitive in their areas, the middle schools offer a lot of electives. And so we're trying to figure out, like, how do you ensure that every single student takes, because we're saying computer science for all, not just for those that might be interested. And so that's our struggle point, is how do you train teachers, and then how do you put it into the master's schedule for middle school and high school?
I think that's a great point. And what I'm listening to, and what as I hear the two sides of the story, Tammy's starting small. She's starting in the classroom. She's showing that things work. She's directly working with kids. Light bulbs are turning on. It's on a small scale. On the other end of that scale is the Pomona model, which has depth and breadth, and you've got a deep resource backing that plan, but there's a plan. And so both of those are effective, right? Because you can start small and it'll grow, and you're affecting your immediate circle, where you can have a very robust plan like you have, Ellen, and just start rolling through that. Both of those instances have an administrator who goes, I get it, and I support that, and let's continue to go do that. And so in both of those instances, you had to educate. And Tammy, you probably had to talk to your administrator who said, what are you doing down there? And you had to say, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing, and here's why it's important, and here's what the kids are getting out of it. And the same for you, Ellen. You probably had those very same types of conversations. Venkat, have you seen, in your experience in terms of implementing within a school system, where do you see those areas being effective, where you're communicating and defining in order to move forward? Do you see some of that in your travels?
Yeah, it's you'll find spectrum of intentionality like Pomona does. There's probably I can tell you there's about a half a dozen districts in California that have shown that intentionality. It should be more than that, but across the board, if you look at it, I can tell you Pomona is an exception to which it shouldn't be that way. Right. Exception to the case because they had intentionality around it. And then I can be honest with you, on the other side, I see about 50% of the districts, even the ad hoc nature of it hasn't been done. Let alone, I mean, ad hoc is good. It's not great, but it's some starting point. Yeah. So you meet all of those, and then suddenly now you see everybody in the political spectrum are starting to realize, oh, this is important. I mean, we've been trying to say this for 10 years now, right? This is important. Now suddenly they're passing legislations to, guess what? All they're trying to do is throw so much more work at by mandating stuff, so to speak. And suddenly the traditional approach becomes the rule of the day of how other subjects were dealt with, even in the coding, computer science and stuff, which it shouldn't be. And that's why districts like Pomona or St. Rain, or there's a whole bunch of other, like Springfield Public Schools or New Caney in Texas. These are some of our customers that who have taken that intentionality and said, I mean, to a point, some of these districts have done, they have looked at their curriculum and they looked at our curriculum, and they matched activities at the curriculum at the activity level. And that's a very matured way. Somebody like Pomona could see that value, but to somebody to do that, initially it could be tough. So there is a crawl, walk, run approach with that. So I tell people, when you are looking at this is not even about a specific vendor comment. You have to have at least a 3-year focused approach And then that is the crawl, walk, run kind of approach. And then your crawl, walk, run becomes a little bit different in the next 3 years because you're progressing into that. But you need to have the right tools and right mechanisms, and most importantly, the right mindset to bring along with that.
I think that one of the things that I really appreciate about that comment is intentionality, because we know that no matter what you're trying to put in place in a system, without the intentionality, it just isn't going to work. It's not going to happen. And so that's one of those things. I know that we're running a little bit out of time. We started a little bit late, and I know that some folks are going to have to jump off. But what I want to try to wrap up with today is some advices for those of us who are sharing the learning, but for the folks who are listening and who will be listening to the recorded version of this episode. What would be, if you could share two kernels of wisdom for folks who are just starting out, who are trying to get this ball rolling, who are trying to be intentional, what would be your advice to them? And I'll go back to Tammy first.
So I just have one piece of advice: do what you can where you are with what you have. Right? We didn't have one-to-one when I started with Scratch, but I will tell you the power in it was, once we went with Scratch and I taught every 7th grader. Then when they got to 8th grade, the 8th grade, they kind of expected things, right? And we had 2 middle schools at Cheney at the time. And I do know that within a couple months, my superintendent popped by and she said, "We have a problem." And I said, "We do?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "The problem is all of your kids are getting this, your students, and the other school, these kids play sports together, they do." And she said, "And now I've got to solve this problem because parents from the other school don't understand why their kids aren't getting it." And she said, "And not only that, now those parents have expectations when their kids get to high school." So even starting where I was with what I knew and what I had, and I started, you saw it, I started small because you can get easily overwhelmed. So I would advise you to start with what you have, where you are, and what you can do. And it all makes a difference.
Nice. I like it. It's starting simple. Ellen, what's your advice?
As I listen to Tammy, I agree 100%. I think that our program is successful because of our teachers, our teacher leaders in EdTech, our teacher specialists. They are the ones that have been, curating the lessons and planning the professional learning. One of the things that I think, if you are going to part with a vendor, one of the things that we're pushing the vendors that we're working with and in doing is, what our teachers need is not another thing that we're going to add to their plate that we're asking them to do. So, and they don't just need, somebody that's gone through and said, "Okay, this lesson, if you do this lesson, you're also hitting these ELA standards and these science standards." But helping us to say, okay, if you replace this science lesson with this lesson from our platform, you can have confidence that your kids will have mastered your science standards, right? Or mastered an ELD standard. And you just need to take this lesson out and put this one in. But we need the companies to do that work, because that's heavy lifting, and that would be a job for 50 other people that we don't have in education, or hire teachers in the summer to do that heavy lifting and make them contractors for you, because that's what our teachers need. They need something that they can go to, because they don't understand the computer science, and a lot of them might not ever understand the computer science, so they don't know confidently, if I did this lesson, will my kids have showed mastery of this math standard? I don't know, and so that's one of the things that we're looking for vendors, and we're partnering with vendors, and we're working with them to say, like, these are our needs. We need you to work with us to grow your platform to meet our needs. And I don't even remember your question, Chris.
No, the question was advice, but I think this is cogent because what I hear is don't try to do it by yourself because you can't. And so the other thing that I hear that I very much appreciate is find a top tier partner, and because your teachers don't fully understand, they'll get it, but find a great resource. Find a great resource. I think that's a great piece of advice, because you're right. You're not going to have the staff to go create things. It's just not going to happen. And so it really does need to be go find a great resource. I think that's really good.
I think every educator knows the teachers don't have time.
Right.
They don't have time to go and figure out what's going to fit where. And they don't, Yep. And their time really needs to be spent, like Leilani says, doing the human things that humans do best.
Absolutely. I know that Venkat had to jog, and so we'll catch up with him another time. I'm going to wrap us up here with some how to get there, and these are all things that we have talked about and sort of danced around, and we've added to. But finding a thought partner is critical. That goes with anything that you're trying. Find a thought partner. Establish that clear purpose, vision, and strategy. Whether you're starting big or small, that's going to be one of those things that you really need to make sure that you're clear on. Where are you going and how are you going to get there? You might not even know yet, but at least let's start with what is our clear purpose and vision, and where are we going to go? Looking for intentional but organic integration. Ellen, you sort of talked about that. Replace one thing with another and look how it works. And that, if that isn't even a representation of that type of computational thinking, then maybe I don't know what is. But look for those areas where it's going to be an easy win, and we can organically integrate. We talked about partnering with top tier resources for sure. Get out there, because there's a lot of really great ones. Tinker is one of those. There's a number of people who can help. Stay focused on the vision and make plans that are going to get you there together. It isn't that you're sitting in the ed tech office and you're laying down some sort of proclamation or some artifacts that you think are going to get this thing done. That won't happen. Communicate and collaborate often. And then finally, partner. If I haven't said the word partner enough, I'm going to continue to say that, because that doesn't just mean find a vendor partner or resource provider partner. It means find thought partners, school partners. For people listening and watching, Tammy and Ellen are now partners, and you need to hold on to their contact information, because they're resources now. They didn't know that they were going to be volunteered for this when they jumped in the call, but they are, and that's part of my role, and the Learning Council's role is to connect folks, because we can't do it alone. We just aren't going to get it done by ourselves. So I know that we're 5 minutes over time, and I don't want to keep you two. I want to make sure that I respect that. I want to thank everybody for being on with us today. Anybody who is listening in, I know that I've got some questions that are popping up for me that I will be fielding, and I do hear my email inbox pinging as well. So I know that there's folks out there in the world that are responding to both of you, Tammy and Ellen and Venkat, who actually had to take another direction. So I'm going to end with this. Up next is our next episode in the Horizon Room. We're talking about transformational change at the speed of coaching. Coaching is critical. We all know that within a system, the transformation that folks are beginning to take on, or are in the middle of, or are at some point in their progression, if you're not leveraging coaching in an effective manner, then you're not moving as effectively as you could. So we're going to have some coaching experts, some varying views on that function within a system. And Ellen, I see you nodding, because you and I have had coaching conversations as well, and Tammy as well. And so, maybe we'll see you in the next one too. It's on May 3rd, 3:00 Eastern time. Thank you so much, Ellen and Tammy, for joining me in this little adventure. I know that we didn't cover everything that we could, and we could probably talk for a long time on this one, but we'll be back. So anyway, thanks for joining me, and thanks for everyone for participating today who joined us, and I'm signing off from the Horizon Room. I'll see you next time. Take care.